So you got 2 cans of tuna at each meal, 1 packet of oatmeal at each meal, and you're doing 1 tablespoon of olive oil at each meal. Super simple, basic, old school, hardcore, I'm broke bodybuilding. What is up, guys? Hypertrophy Coach Joe Bennett here to answer this question today. How do I get shredded? And I'm gonna do it in 5 easy steps. This is from a Q&A. So in the past, I've done Q&As. I try and answer 5, 6, 7, 8, 12 questions. I'm gonna do some of them a little bit shorter than my long videos, but a little bit longer than I do short in the Q&As, if that makes sense. So I'm gonna answer this, like I said today, you're gonna say, somebody's already saying, hey, there's 6 here, so I'm gonna go into that in a minute. But in 5 easy steps, and I'm gonna go through these in more detail in the next slides, but step number 1 is establish maintenance. And really with that, consistency over accuracy is the most important, but you can do both ideally. I'll go into that in a minute. From there, you're gonna decrease food or increase expenditure or do both at the same time. I recommend step 4, you do this slow and steady over fast, although you can do it fast as well too. We'll talk about some of the things that happen with that. And then 5, if you decide to go the fast route, you might want some diet breaks or some refeeds, so we'll talk about those briefly. And then number 6, yes, PEDs make it easier. Someone's gonna go in the comment section, just take drugs, just take PEDs. Yes, they speed up the process, they make it easier, but all the same rules I'm gonna go through here just hold true. So again, I'm gonna go through this one relatively quickly. I can go on and on and on about any subject for a long period of time, but this is one of those where I think, honestly, it's people, a lot of, analysis by paralysis. It's one of those things that the actual things you need from a knowledge base are really simple, but the adherence is really, really hard. So let's make sure that we've got all the really simple parts down right. And so what do I mean here with established maintenance, and why is consistency more important than accuracy? Ideally both. So both would be tracking your macros. So hopefully at some point in time, if you're watching this video, you know what macros are, from your carbohydrates to your proteins to your fats. That's really the ideal way. So even though I have this second, I'm gonna talk about this first. If you know exactly what your intake is of all of those, then there's gonna be zero mystery about how you or what you need to do to lose weight, obviously, which is the goal of get shredded, or on the other side of that, if you're trying to put on weight, how to actually increase your body weight. But why would I say that consistency is the most important? Because the most important, and what this really allows you to make sure you're doing, is you just need to do the exact same thing every single day, basically. So you know that if you make adjustments to it, you know what's happening. Now, if you track your macros, you could actually have some subtle different things happening day to day, but still over the span of a week or a month, you could make sure that as a whole, you're in a deficit. And so what is my example here that I like to do is the can of tuna. I'm not recommending this diet, so someone don't start to write this down. But let's say you're trying to lose weight, and every single day you eat 6 cans of tuna, 3 packets of oatmeal, and you do a tablespoon of olive oil at every single meal. So that's your thing. What did I say? Let's say it's 3 meals. So you got 2 cans of tuna at each meal, 1 packet of oatmeal at each meal, and you're doing 1 tablespoon of olive oil at each meal. Super simple, basic, old school, hardcore, I'm broke bodybuilding diet. And let's say you're doing this, and your body weight stays exactly the same. So that's a big part of this, is how do you check? Well, get on the scale the same time every single day. You do this whole thing for a week, and after you're eating the exact same thing every single day for a week, your body weight does not change. It's basically the same every single day. You have found maintenance. You don't have to know what your macros are. You're eating an amount that basically keeps things exactly the same. So if that's maintenance, I want to say, what do I want to do to lose weight? Well, whatever your activity level is, you could increase it. Or without knowing how many calories I'm going to decrease it, you're going to say, well, I'm just going to take some calories out. One meal, you eat 1 less tablespoon of olive oil. Or one meal, you just eat a can of tuna and the olive oil and have no oatmeal packet. And I guarantee if everything else stays the same, the following week, as a result of the decrease of calories or increase of output, you will lose body weight. So there's a whole host of examples you could go through that. Again, obviously that's probably not the best diet. You're going to miss some stuff that's probably important for you to be healthy and a functioning human being. But that's just an example of why you really don't have to do this macro thing. People knew how to get shredded before they necessarily tracked every single macronutrient and every single calorie. Now again, for things like optimal recovery training, protein really matters, ratios of carbohydrates and fats matter. So that's where I really say the ideal is to do both. You live kind of monk-like, where your food's not changing every single day, and you also know exactly how much protein, how much carbs, how much fat, and the more detailed you get, those ratios can be important as well too, but that's kind of a separate video. 2 and 3 here putting together, you can really, again, how do you get shredded? You have to create a calorie deficit. There's the mystery. So let's say we're doing this thing where your input every single day, input meaning what you're eating, is 3,000 calories. So this is how you establish your maintenance. And then your output every single day is 3,000 calories. So whatever it is, you've established maintenance like I did from the previous video. You establish maintenance by basically figuring out, okay, is my body weight staying exactly the same? Doesn't have to be an exact time frame, but like I mentioned, like a week is a good time. So over the course of a week, your body weight stays roughly the same. Yes, it'll fluctuate up and down a pound or so every single day possibly, or even a couple pounds with water or who knows what stress, low sleep, training. But as the result, if your body weight stays the same and you say, okay, I've calculated it's either you could write down the cans of tuna or whatever you want to do, or from doing your macros and determining calories, you realize, okay, it's 3,000 calories a day. All you have to do now is create a deficit. So what does that look like? So one, we could do a decrease in food. So if your input is 3,000 and we take away 300 calories, however you want to take them away. Most people will mess with carbs and fats before they'll mess with protein, but you can certainly take away protein as well too. And so we subtract these things. Let me go back here. So if we're at maintenance and we subtract 3,000 from 3,000, your result is 0. You're in roughly a 0 calorie deficit, which is why your weight has stayed the same. But let's say we decide to take 300 calories of food away. What are we at now? We are at, quick meathead math, hopefully you guys didn't need to get the calculator out. That is negative 300, which means you are now in a 300 calorie a day deficit, and you will lose weight as long as you are in that same deficit. What are your other options? I'm glad you asked. So we could say, well, I want to keep my food at 3,000 because you like to eat and you don't want to lose that. But now instead of your output being 3,000, just doing whatever you've been doing, you decide, okay, well, I'm going to start doing something that burns 300 calories a day of cardio. Don't get fixated on what it is. You could walk, you could do a treadmill, you could do a stepper, whatever. Just do a rough calculation. And what do we do from there? Well, we add 300 calories to our output every single day. And I shouldn't have written that down because we can just do that math. But the quick meathead math is 3,300 calories is now our output. We subtract our output from our input, and guess what? You are in a 300 calorie a day deficit. And it honestly is that simple. When someone says, I can't lose weight, basically all they're saying is I don't really know what my maintenance is, and I'm not doing anything to consistently adjust either my input or my output. And then of course, like I said, I'm not gonna do the math again, but let's say, hey, I wanna do a little bit of each. Well, basically you could take 150 calories away from your input, and at the same time, you could add 150 calories a day to output and result in the same deficit, or larger amounts. Obviously, these are just some made up numbers. So once we figured that out, why do I recommend slow and steady over fast? Well, slow and steady over fast for a couple of reasons. One, and again, this is kind of on a scale. So this isn't just like there's one point where if you go from, I make up 200 to 300 calories a day is slow and steady, and all of a sudden once you hit 500, it's too fast. But obviously there's gonna be big differences between you doing 200 to 300 calorie deficit a day and 1,000, 1,500, or 2,000 calorie deficit a day as well too. At some point in time on that scale, as you get more drastic, create a larger deficit, you're not gonna hold as much muscle. So with a smaller deficit, more moderate, you're gonna hold more muscle, generally be able to train harder, and hormonally be more optimal. Again, if you want, you can go into more detail. There's tons of people that have done videos on that, but hormonally things tend to not go the best way. So it's not only one is you don't hold as much muscle. Over time, your maintenance will decrease because the amount of muscle you have will decrease, and that will decrease your output. That's just that basal metabolic rate, just how much you're burning just existing throughout the day. So one, you will start to, again, drop that basal metabolic rate faster, drop your maintenance calories faster if you are in a bigger deficit. And then aside from that, if you're in too big of a deficit for too long, some hormones that you want to stay in certain places tend to slip the wrong direction as well too. And again, that's as much detail as I'm gonna go into that. Now, all that being said, this is where you get things. I'm not saying not to do a larger deficit. You absolutely can. And again, if you have lots of good reasons for it, like let's say you're crashing you got a vacation coming up, you got a wedding coming up, or you're even trying to get on stage and you're a little bit behind, there's lots of reasons that people will go past just a moderate deficit. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. But this might be the place where you'll hear people at some point in time talking about diet breaks or refeeds. And there's really two reasons to do those. One, if you're doing more of a refeed, which tends to be shorter periods of time, so maybe every 3, 4, 5, 6 days, whatever it is, when you're doing that, you have to make sure over the course of, let's say, a whole week or a whole month, you're still in a deficit. But by having periods of time where, let's say for a day, your calories are back to a surplus, it can help improve your training, and hormonally, it can help some of those hormones go back the direction you want them. So it's more of kind of a short-term again, offsetting some of those negative side effect things. Whereas a diet break can have some of the same benefit, it generally tends to be longer. Sometimes it's just even putting you at maintenance. And again, it does some of the same stuff. It allows you to train a little bit harder, hormonally, things kind of go back in the right direction. And both of those can be, one, done for those physical reasons, and then two, also done for mental reasons. So again, sometimes, again, if anyone tells you that dieting's not hard, they're confused. It might not be super hard, the first week. It might not be super hard the first 5-10 pounds. But if you're dieting for a long enough period of time, it's not a bad thing. It doesn't make you a bad person to be mentally tired of it or exhausted or just craving to eat some more food some period of time. So you can, of course, do refeeds and diet breaks, not just for the physiological benefits, but for some mental, emotional benefits, whatever you want to call it as well, too. And so again, all of those things, one, put those in the category of neither is right or wrong. But as you can see, like you can really, if you're just in a slow to moderate deficit, you can have that run for a long, long period of time. And there's actually, good research that shows in a moderate deficit, you can still actually put on muscle, let alone, of course, maintain muscle. So again, doing that for a longer period of time, because when people diet, yeah, you want to look better, yeah, you want to lose body fat, but if you're losing tons of muscle along the way, that obviously kind of defeats the overall purpose of, again, most people want to get shredded to look good. And again, looking good is not just about low body fat, it's also about holding on to some muscle. All that being said, it's just more about creating awareness. So if you do want to do a more aggressive diet for a relatively shorter period of time, just be aware you might lose a little bit more muscle. Again, long term, you can always fix it. And then you might benefit more from these diet breaks and refeeds. And then kind of like I mentioned briefly, you just always have to track and adjust and realize those numbers, even when you're on a moderate to small deficit for a long period of time, what your maintenance calories are can change. So some people say, oh, I've been dieting for this period of time and now I'm just stuck. I'm in the same deficit, I'm doing the same thing, I'm eating the same stuff. Well, 2,700 calories at some point in time might have been enough to put you in a 300 calorie a day deficit. But for a long enough period of time, especially with more aggressive cut, you might lose some muscle, which decreases your basal metabolic rate, or you might have some things hormonally kind of create a similar effect. And so over time, you might slowly lose muscle, slowly lose output. Sometimes when people are tired, they just have less daily activity than when they started as well too. They don't realize they're just taking, less steps. They're less likely to get up. They're less likely to go out and walk. So even though you're saying, hey, I'm still at 2,700 calories, this used to have me losing weight, well, now your new maintenance might have gone from 3,000 to 2,700. So this is why tracking and everything is very important. And again, at that point in time, you could do a diet break, you could do a refeed, or you might just have to adjust your calories. Now to be in a 300 calorie a day deficit again, instead of being at 2,700 calories, you might have to go at 2,400 calories. So again, you really just need to track and adjust as you're going along. That kind of stuff doesn't happen too much with 4 to 6 week diets or things like that. But again, as things go on for months, or if you're more aggressive with your cuts, those things are more likely. And like I said, so how do PEDs help? Well, they can help in two ways. One, the amount of muscle that you have. So again, a lot of people put in PEDs the categories of steroids, things that help you put on muscle. So one, when you're on PEDs, you can actually put on muscle more easily when you're in a deficit. So while you're in deficit, you could actually increase what your maintenance is just from putting on tissue. Or it can allow you to be in a more aggressive diet or more aggressive deficit for a longer period of time. So with a normal person, let's say I'm gonna do 1,000, 1,500 calorie a day cut. And again, just because hormonally that doesn't put you in the best place to hold on to tissue, you might start to lose, half a pound of muscle every whatever time frame. Whereas if you're on PEDs, you might be able to diet more aggressively. And even if you get to a point where you can't put on muscle, you'll hold muscle a lot easier. So that's one way that PEDs work. To make dieting easier is, again, the amount of muscle you have. And then, of course, there's PEDs as well, too, that just aid in the fat loss process. They just basically increase your output, speed up your metabolic rate, speed up the fat burning process. And then also you could put in the category as well, too, there are some things, there's obviously natural things you could do as well, too, but there are over-the-counter there are prescription type things that also help you decrease appetite, which, again, doesn't really change the input or the output, but it can make you being in a deficit easier as well too. So I just always put that as well too, because someone always likes to say, just take drugs. And the reality is there are for sure, there are of course some that lie, like all across society, but there are for sure some legit 100% natural bodybuilders out there that get crazy shredded. So again, some people will always say the only way to get shredded is PEDs or drugs or whatever. And of course, people on the Olympia stage and the IFBB are all using them. But you can absolutely get shredded following all of this advice, and you don't need drugs at all. It just might take you a little bit longer and you won't be as ginormous at the end. So recap, you want to be shredded, establish your maintenance, create a deficit, My recommendation is to go slow and steady unless you have a really good reason for the more aggressive deficit. Track your progress, adjust as needed as that maintenance may change as you're dieting longer. And if you're going more aggressive, diet breaks, refeeds might be needed. Aside from that, don't overcomplicate it. Again, it's a relatively simple process. Just get in and do the work, and 9 times out of 10, if someone's having a hard time getting shredded, losing weight, losing body fat, or all the same holds the true for putting on weight, it generally just means you're not tracking things accurately enough or consistently enough. Hope you guys enjoyed this. Go get shredded. After watching my content, have you ever thought to yourself, man, I like how Joe went to school for this, has more formal education than 99% of other coaches, with over 20 years and 20,000 hours experience training clients in person, how he's managed training departments for several companies and helped develop literally thousands of trainers, as well as the fact that he's won 2 overall bodybuilding titles, competed at the national level, and has trained everyone from clients in their 90s all the way up to Mr. and Miss Olympia. And then you're all like, dang, I wish I had Joe's brain. And not in a creepy way, like in a jar on your mantle, but maybe just in your pocket to reference, maybe occasionally gently stroke and pet, and to help guide your gains when in the gym. Well, my friend, you are in luck. My app is essentially just that, my hypertrophy brain right in your pocket at your fingertips, packed with over 25 full programs tailored to every level and goal. The ability to create your own programs, logbook and track your progress, and a diet builder that generates and adjusts custom macros, as well as allows you to track your food and meals. It also has hundreds of hours of educational content and one-on-one support in the forums where you can get custom audio replies from myself and my coaches, and literally so much more. Best of all, you can try all it has to offer risk-free for 7 days. Click the link in the description down below and let the brain and physique gains begin.